Imagine a country where the king lives in golden palaces, the nobles enjoy lavish feasts, yet the streets reek of hunger. The weapon that toppled this kingdom was neither guns, nor armies, nor barricades. It was invisible, yet unstoppable. It was money. France, in the late 18th century, did not fall because of ideals alone. It fell because coins, debts, and paper bills betrayed trust, distorted power, and ignited a revolution. By the 1770s, France had become a land of extremes. Luxurious royal palaces like Versailles displayed the monarchy's opulence, while peasants begged for bread. Wars, especially the costly American Revolution, had emptied the royal treasury. Louis XVI inherited a system drowned in debt that had accumulated over centuries. The tax system was based on severe injustice. The church and nobility were largely exempt, and the entire burden fell on the common people. Inflation was slowly eroding purchasing power, and every coin became a symbol of both survival and resentment. France's financial problems had been building for decades. By the 1780s, the country was on the brink of bankruptcy. The debt burden was so massive that it could not be lifted, and poor harvests, along with famine, made daily life extremely difficult. In 1789, the Estates General was convened to find a solution to the crisis, but it only revealed the deep divide between the privileged estates and the Third Estate. Money, which had once been a means of stability, had now become a weapon of tension. As prices soared and the currency's value plummeted, anger spread through the streets of Paris. Inflation turned scarcity into outrage. Trust in coins and paper notes vanished. Markets became unstable. People started hoarding goods and began questioning the king's government for failing to protect them. Intellectuals and pamphlet writers acted like a strong wind fanning the flames, demanding economic justice and equality. Behind every slogan was a silent question. Could France's financial system survive, or was destruction written in its fate? By mid-1789, France had reached its breaking point. People's faith in the king's ability to manage money was shattered. The Estates General turned into conflict, and the Third Estate formed the National Assembly, directly challenging royal authority. The storming of the Bastille on July 14, 1789, was not just a search for weapons, it was a fight for bread, economic power, and control over resources. When coins no longer represented stability in society, revolution became inevitable. Afterward came catastrophe. The government confiscated church lands and issued paper notes called Initially, people trusted them because they were backed by land, but excessive printing caused hyperinflation. By 1795, the value of assignats had completely collapsed. Prices were skyrocketing, and basic goods were unattainable. Money, once a symbol of security, now became a sign of uncertainty and distrust. Markets were destroyed, riots broke out, and revolutionary leaders failed to maintain order. Attempts to fix the crisis were unsuccessful. Controlling prices, rationing, new taxes, and debt restructuring, nothing could restore trust. The assignats became a lesson. Printing money without backing destroys confidence. The French Revolution proved that financial mismanagement can topple a government faster than any army. History repeats itself. Today, seeing hyperinflation, currency, devaluation, and economic inequality in Venezuela, Zimbabwe, and Lebanon reminds us that these issues still destabilize countries. During the French Revolution, bread prices tripled in just a few years, leaving people starving. Even today, rising food prices, currency crises, and the rich-poor gap repeat the same patterns. In France at that time, the tax system was profoundly unjust. The clergy, First Estate, and nobility, Second Estate, paid no taxes, while the Third Estate, which was 98% of the population, bore the entire load. This injustice was not just financial, but also political and social. People felt that the government was not for them, but only for the elite. France had supported the Americans in the American Revolution to harm Britain, but the cost was enormous. France spent nearly 1.3 billion livres, a huge portion of the treasury at the time. The debt kept growing, and paying interest became impossible. King Louis XVI himself was a good person, but a weak ruler. He wanted reforms, but the nobility and church blocked him. Finance ministers like Necker, Turgot, and Calonne suggested reforms, but each time the nobility refused. In the end, the Estates General had to be culled for the first time in 175 years. When the National Assembly began drafting a constitution and confiscated church property, it was proof of financial desperation. Assignats were initially successful helping control inflation in 1789 to 1790, when the government printed more for every problem wars, budget deficits. By 1796, the value of an assignat fell to less than 1%. During hyperinflation, people carried notes in wheelbarrows to the market just to buy a loaf of bread. People started using foreign currency or barter systems. This distrust made the reign of terror even worse, because people no longer trusted the government. This lesson is still alive today. In Venezuela, inflation exceeded 1,000,000% in 2018. In Zimbabwe in 2008, people used trillion-dollar notes that were worthless. In Lebanon since 2019, the currency has fallen more than 90%. Everywhere, the pattern is the same. Excessive money printing, corruption, lack of trust, and then social unrest. Money is never neutral. It is power, it is trust, and when misused, it is destruction. The French Revolution taught us that when people feel the system is against them, that the elite is taking the fruit of their labor, that their money is becoming worthless. Day by day, they take to the streets. History echoes. Countries do not fall only from wars, but from wrong financial decisions, the breaking of trust, and the growing burden of injustice. Look beyond kings. And battles look at the coins, the debts, the paper notes that quietly decide the fate of nations. This story is not just France's. It is the story of every society where money drifts far from justice. Beyond the collapse of the treasury, multiple forces fueled the French Revolution's social and economic upheaval. Peasants struggled under crushing taxes and centuries-old feudal dues to landlords, nobles, and the church, leaving barely enough to survive. Reckless speculation among financiers and loss of confidence in the monarchy sent banking and trade into chaos. Cities like Paris faced soaring bread prices, while rural areas suffered crop failures and poor infrastructure, deepening famine. Wars and disrupted trade made scarcity worse, and repeated attempts at reform by finance ministers Necker Turgot and Colonna failed against elite resistance and public distrust. Trust in money disappeared. Coins were hoarded, melted, or counterfeited, creating fear and uncertainty. Economic hardship became political, as leaders linked money to liberty and equality. Speculation in confiscated church lands brought short-term gains, but long-term losses, while artisans and merchants defaulted under rising prices, sparking urban unrest. Women led food riots, demanding immediate justice, and unrest spread to cities like Lyon and Marseille. Assignats, initially backed by land, were overprinted, causing hyperinflation and destroying public confidence. Famine drove rural migration. Stagnant wages and soaring prices made survival hard, and disease outbreaks worsened suffering. Military logistics collapsed as unpaid soldiers went undersupplied, while corruption, hoarding, and mismanagement deepened distrust. Hyperinflation pushed citizens toward radical factions like dissents. Legal disputes and propaganda fueled friction, turning economic fear into political action. Every coin, note, and property transfer carried symbolic weight. As assignats became more than currency, they embodied ideology. Fear of scarcity forced extreme action, showing that financial failure alone can spark mass rebellion. The French Revolution proves that mismanaged money, social inequality, and loss of trust can topple a state faster than any army. When money loses its stability, society itself teeters on the edge of chaos.